All right, welcome back. Well, yes, Olumide BraithWaite joins us this morning. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning. Good morning, Chamberlain. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, too, for coming on. So this Sunday would be the 90th posthumous birthday of your father, late Professor Dr. Tunji BraithWaite. And, well, yes, indeed, several activities of his. What a crusader he was, his strides in the legal profession. So they're all there in the sands of time that he left. So that's why at this point in time, we're just looking back, just trying to see where the country is today. Some of the key things that, people easily remember himself, late Professor, this guy following me, crusaders. People always remember such persons, and there's several others too who are even currently carrying the torch in that legal profession and across different parts of the country. So, what is the key focus? You, the family, at this point in time?
Thank you very much. That is such a sophisticated entreaty to start this conversation. The ideals that my late father, Tunji BraithWaite, stood for was essentially a revolutionary change to the way governance, society had been straitjacketed, if you like, 40 years ago when he contested for the presidency of this country. The legacy of those utopian ideals, if you like, is to have a free and fair society for all Nigerians, devoid of religious or ethnic marginalization. The legacy also embraces the youths, and has always done, because we have power and numbers in this country, the 18 to 40-year-olds, as has been demonstrated by the voting patterns. Even in this recent election, we've seen a phenomenon where the young people have taken destiny in their own hands. And for us as a family, there's the Tunji BraithWaite Foundation, and we have other institutions, for example, in trying to transmit and communicate those ideals with the younger generation of today. We have BraithWaite TV, which is a social media TV station that tries to educate and communicate with the young people with some of those ideals that at the beginning of the nation, this country, those men, those visionary men, stood by.
I didn't remember your father as a lawyer. There are many who would not remember him as the lawyer that he is. The Supreme Court, attorney of the Supreme Court. But many will remember him as a politician who went into a national, I'm trying to get that name, Nigeria Advanced Party.
Yes.
They remember him as in the 80s against the Shehu Shagari, and then the military came in, and then later on, the SDP, NRC, and all those stuff. He was there. What landmarks would you say your father left behind that could be a plus to the political stage we are in right now? What would your father be saying at times like this if he were here at 90?
Your first reference that many Nigerians know him as a politician, that was at the national level. But of course, he was a lawyer. And his first foray, I guess, into activism would be when he represented Fela, Nicola Pokusi, the unknown soldier case. And that bond, that relationship, I know as a little boy in the house how that, projected him into politics, because he felt that why would I restrict myself to the courtroom? Rather than that, let me make a bigger stage for the country, represent, the downtrodden and the masses. As far as some of his political views as regarding contemporary issues today, well, I would say that it's a mixed bag. The style of governance has to be dynamic, has to be bold, has to be brave, and the leadership, has to come right from the top. I'll make a reference because my very first interaction with Mr. President Bola Tinubu, he told me that it was people like my father, progressives like that encouraged him to join politics. Of course, you'll know that during the Abacha years, when a lot of politicians fled in exile, he remained here and very bravely, at a lot of expense and personal safety to his life and everything, he fought on. So I think those are the things that we have to take on. Of course, technology and all kinds of things have taken over within that period of time. But in terms of our ideals, I think, those parameters are very, very important for us, particularly going forward.
I read some of his interviews, and there are several actually. There was this particular one where he talked about when he came back, when he graduated from London and came back to Nigeria in 1961, and they had British passports those days. But then they threw away their British passports because they felt, look, we have our Nigerian passports. Why should we hold British passports? When I was talking about where it went wrong for Nigeria, because he just thought, look, the British, the colonial masters, didn't really want full independence for Nigeria. They wanted a nominal independence. So what they did at that time was they didn't get the best of Nigerians, the sharp ones into politics. They got the ones who, the lower end, so they created some sort of thirst for Western ideals in the minds of those lads, because if they got Nigerians who were up there, they will ensure that we do things right. But he was talking about the governance, the style of governance, where we were at that time and now. So for you, going through all of that, what he stood for, the dream he had for the country, and looking at where Nigeria is today, because several other people who will read that piece today will consider this sounded like fables. Who will throw away foreign passports? Most people want to go get it because it's an avenue. Economic migrants, many of them eventually become. So looking at where we are today and what his ideals were at that time, clearly two different scenarios. What goes through your mind because many people think, look, it's difficult to get back to those kind of days now. What goes through your mind when you see that?
Again, Chamberlain, you're very much on point. It's a hard situation to reconcile because we only have one country, and Nigeria has fallen, but we are still here, as we were musing earlier on. We are still here, and there's a lot that we still have to do. We have a huge population on the African continent that we still need to take our leadership position on the African continent. And we have to start looking inwards. There's been an over-proliferation, if you like, on some of our exports on oil products, but we have to diversify. And these were the things that he was talking about 40 years ago. I remember people will tell me that, he was ahead of his time in terms of his political ideology and concept for the economy and how we can build a nation. But I would still like to believe that those are still achievable. Not easy.
Yeah, speaking about what's achievable, because what he said at the time still resonates today, where the best of us are not in politics. And you had the stint, and still is, at the time. What would you tell lots of people who just feel, look, professionals don't go into politics, and many of them are not encouraged to come into politics? They even give us examples of how they made mistakes in 1999. After fighting for democracy, then it came, they just felt, no, it wasn't for us. They took a back seat, and then several other people went there, and then they'll tell you, look at where we are today. For those who feel it's a hard ask to, one, get professionals into politics, or keep hope alive, as the generation of Nigerians at that time did, even up until his death. Because, of course, you have some people who are still doing that today, human rights activists who've been there for a long time. They're still alive in this country, several of them, even in the legal profession, they're still doing it. What would you tell young people who, at the moment, think all hope is lost?
Okay, so, again, I'll make reference to the last general elections. And that, for me, was extremely significant. Because when you're talking about the youths, my late father spent a lot of time with the youths, with the student unions and different youth movements across the country. And I used to wonder that, why is he bothering with these youths? But now we know, because in terms of numbers in this country, the youth cannot be ignored any longer. My message, my simple message is that Nigerians we are brilliant people, okay? We are smart, we are savvy. We're all over the world. We need to build our nation again. We need to have that identity again. And you have identified correctly some of the constraints, some of the difficulties for professionals. But if you look abroad, and if you look at history, because this is, again, where I'm going, because we don't retain history in our education. I believe that has changed recently. But we need to look at history. And history will tell you that it is the professionals, it is the youths that actually drive the political trajectory of any country. It's the privileged who are supposed to stand in for the oppressed. That's the message. I think the young Nigerians are standing up for their rights. So in terms of that, I think that's a healthy position that we're in now.
The space, what you're seeing out there and the space that we have. Now we have social media. Thank God you mentioned the BraithWaite social media team. We have social media saying quite a lot, speaking per second, and many Nigerians will listen to that more than they even listen to government. And if for one who's also a communicator, I know your father was a talker, so to speak, communicating at every point, and you say he spent a lot of time with the youth. How should leadership speak to the Nigerians? How? And what should they be saying at this point in time?
It's a very, very apt question. There is a need, there's an absolute need for that communication. And that communication can be done in numerous ways. But there is a need now, a dialogue, constantly, or a platform for that, because it's an exchange, the old and the new. And they have to be synergized. If not, then, it's like we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So I believe and I hope that style, that communication that has not been there is going to be there. Or I'm seeing signs of that. I'm encouraged by that.
But what do you think needs to be done for, I know many will say, look, it's just one simple thing, fix the economy. It's a global village now, we know. And many look to young people and think, oh, look at the way the founding fathers did certain things at the time. But yeah, that was then. Young people who are doing it in their own way now, I know the difference would be, okay, look, what was the result now and then? So it's out there for people to judge. But many people still looking for economic improvements outside the shores of this country because they feel leaders in this country have failed them. Incidentally, your party is in power now, so they will bear a lot of the brunt, saying they have failed us. In the last 8 years, they were there, they're still here now. So for those people, what would be your message for them?
We are where we are today. The reality that we're facing with the removal of the subsidy. There's some hard questions we have to ask ourselves. We have to look inward. We have to be resilient. We have to be a little bit patient. We have to be a bit tolerant. We have to be optimistic. And we have to work hard together as a people. My late father was always an optimist as far as Nigeria was concerned, even when everything was collapsing all around.
Is it understandable? Because he saw it when it was really good.
Yes.
And he felt it could be like that.
Absolutely.
But many people didn't see it.
No, not at that time.
Yeah. Today, people haven't seen what it was at the time. So hence, people are, that's their own reality.
Yeah. That's the duty that we, people like me, have to always stand in the gap to try to bridge so that we can retain some of those good ideals. Because let's face it, we're all getting on, and the younger generation are the ones that are faced with this burden, and they need all the help that they can get.
Let's bring in our colleagues in Lagos.
Yes, thank you, Chamberlain. Good morning from Lagos. Let's check on what's happening with the National Advance Party, which was founded by your late father. I recall he said that he founded it to break away from the politics of neo-colonialism. I'm wondering how much progress that we have made from there. What are your observations in that regard?
In terms of our national independence, when you're talking about independence, you also have to talk about economic independence. We haven't scored very well in that scorecard because in terms of our economy, we haven't grown it as much as we could have done. And as far as our associations and treaties with the West are concerned, of course, you have the ascension of China in Africa and in Nigeria. And some would argue that that's another form of neo-colonialism. But we have to always constantly strive to, look at opportunities and open our borders to what we feel is best for our own interests.
And I was also reading one of his interviews where he said he didn't believe in the concept and ranking of senior advocate of Nigeria, and that's why he never opted for it. He said it's an importation from our colonial masters, Britain. Within the context of what's now happening, with the scrutiny of senior advocates, particularly at the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, how does that resonate with you?
Yes, my father was very radical. He would have been a senior advocate several times over, but felt that the process here in Nigeria, as opposed to the UK, where the common law, where the Queen's Council or the King's Council now is derived from, was completely different. Over there, there's a secret body that confers those awards, as opposed to here, where you apply and it's fraught with all kinds of considerations. Having said that, of course, we have very brilliant legal minds, many brilliant senior advocates. I was with one yesterday. With regard to the recent petitions, electoral petitions, I would say, and Dr. Clark, senior advocate of Nigeria, I saw in an interview last week, I would also align with him to say that that's more robust in terms of the judgments and the reasoning there. It's making the jurisprudence, the legal profession, the legal system more robust because there's more scrutiny now. It's a good development.
Well, Mr. BraithWaite, there's something that you said the other time that caught my interest, and it's always been one of my own personal interests, which is talking about young people. Legacy is supposed to be very, very long-lasting. Now, the generation in which your dad operated and the one you are operating are completely different. In some quarters, they say there is Nigeria and then there is Niger. The challenge here is communicating across these generations. You talked about patience. How much of that can we preach to the young people of today when it was the same thing that upheld those in the past, but today it's a very scarce commodity, patience, particularly in the light of distrust over the years. Well, how do we move forward from here?
I think, thank you. I think we still have to retain some elements of that. But the government of the day has a responsibility to the electorate, to the population to deliver. And they should also be held accountable for that. So I would certainly align with that position, that the young people should be patient, but also should be mindful of the challenges that we're facing. And as I mentioned earlier on, there has to be a synergy, there has to be a relationship. And that's how it has to be. And I believe that maybe for the first time, we're moving towards that.
What kind of relationship is that?
We have to have interactive opportunities. We have to engage small and medium-scale enterprises. By nature, Nigerians are traders. And we have to be more engaging and create more opportunities, more platforms for youthful enterprises. You see what's happening in the entertainment space and how well Nigerians are doing. So if we can take elements from that for the economy and for education, for me, those are priorities.
So winding down on this, I mean, in the entertainment sector, you see that they flourish.
Yes.
Because you don't have all those encumbrances, as it were, red tapeism, all of that. In politics, in your party, do you see that? Do you think, do you see any signs where you think they'll allow the young persons to rise? And then, because I know some politicians say, look, we fought during our time for this independence, and some other people wanted to drop on their laps. Many would disagree with that, of course. But what is the scenario in your party? Do they have that opportunity?
Well, I would say that those opportunities can be better. They can be better improved. And we're going to, the young generation are already challenging for a seat at the table. And rightly so. So my simple answer to that would be that, well, yes, but certainly there's room for improvement.
Okay, then. Thank you very much. Olumide BraithWaite is a lawyer. He's a son of late Dr. Tunji BraithWaite. All the best, and again, we're always here wherever we're possible.
Thank you very much, Chamberlain.